I am Anna Seewald, and this is Authentic Parenting, a podcast about personal development in the context of parenting, where I explore how you can find more calm, connection, and joy in parenting through the process of self-discovery and inner growth with a trauma-informed lens. Today, we are talking about how not to lose your cool with your kids. The truth about losing your cool, that it's not your fault, why it's so hard to stop losing your temper, the downsides of exploding, owning your buttons and triggers, and of course, things you have to do if you don't want to lose your cool with your kids. With Carla Naumberg. She's a writer, speaker, parent coach. She's the author of Ready, Set, Breathe, Practicing Mindfulness with Your Children for Fewer Meltdowns and a More Peaceful Family, and Parenting in the Present Moment, How to Stay Focused on What Really Matters, and her latest book, How to Stop Losing Your S with Your Kids, is now available for pre-order. Carla lives outside of Boston with her husband and 2 young daughters and 2 totally insane cats. Carla was a guest on the podcast before, back in 2016. And if you scroll through your podcast app, you can see the replay of her episode 89, How to Stop Yelling at Your Kids. Quite a popular episode. And now please enjoy this lively conversation with my friend and colleague, Carla Naumberg. Carla Naumberg, my dear friend, welcome to Authentic Parenting again.
Thank you. I'm so happy to be back.
I know, I'm excited. And I feel bad because we are good friends, right? Online friends. And I feel like I should have you more on the podcast.
That is so sweet. Thank you.
I know it's been a long time, and your episode last time, How to Stop Yelling at Your Kids, is a still very popular episode, even though I think it was recorded back in 2000, either 16 or 17. I can't remember.
Your podcast has been going for so long. That's awesome.
Yes, 4 years, Carla.
That's fantastic.
And I am not losing my S yet with this podcast. And I am very excited to talk to you about your new book, and with this provocative title, How to Stop Losing Your Beep S with Your Kids.
That's right. And the book title actually has the word in it, the S word, although we did put a little asterisk on the cover, but the S word is in there.
I hear you. This is the only book, I guess, I've read that has this S word so liberally sprinkled all over the pages.
Yeah,
it kind of sort of diminishes a lot of people are emotionally charged when they hear this word. They have a big thing. I personally don't, but I think by using it and overusing it so much in the book, it makes it less like that. I don't know what I'm saying, but you tell me, why did you choose to use the word in the first place?
Yeah, it's a great question. So there are a couple of reasons, but the main one is I wanted this book to feel like a conversation between 2 people about parenting and about one of the hardest aspects of parenting and a reality of parenting that many parents feel very ashamed about. And by putting this word in the title, by using a very casual voice, it's funny, there's lots of jokes, there's silliness, and there's also a lot of really good information based in research, in neuroscience, in child development, in attachment theory, and all these things that as a clinical social worker I've studied. And so I wanted this mix because I wanted to offer a different kind of parenting books to parents. And the reason is I've look, there are a million parenting books out there and some truly incredible ones that are dog-eared on my shelf that have really made parenting so much easier for me. And I've also talked to a lot of parents who come away from many parenting books feeling even more ashamed, feeling like they've already got it wrong, that there's all these things they should be doing, these strategies with their children they should be implementing every day. And for one reason or another, it doesn't work with the reality of their lives. And then they feel bad. And so I wanted to write a book that was fun to read, that had really good information, and that reminded parents that they don't need to take themselves quite so seriously, that none of us need to, we can laugh about this. Parenting is hard and it's crazy and it's joyful and it's okay to laugh about it. And so I really wanted a book that just felt like a really different parenting book. And I know that a lot of people will say, I totally lost it with my kids today. I can't believe it. And we really struggle with this. We parents, we don't want to lose our temper with our children. And yet so many of us find ourselves on that edge so often. And so I wanted to help parents, understand why that's happening. And spoiler alert, it's not your fault. It's just the reality of being a human parent. And I wanted to give parents some really concrete strategies for how to stay more patient, for how to not lose their temper as often. And I wanted to do it in a funny way.
Yes, I think you have accomplished it. After reading the book, I can say that comes across. Yes, the serious stuff about trauma and attachment is there, and your humorous style, your wit, and the helpful tips, I have to say, it's a very practical book. So congratulations.
Thank you.
Yes. And it reminds me of that book, Go the F to Sleep.
Yes,
do you know that book?
Oh, of course I do. Absolutely. It's hilarious.
Yes, there is a good reading of this man
was it Samuel L. Jackson?
I think so, right? I'm going to link that in the show notes. It's just so hilarious. Yes. So then let's talk about what makes us to lose our cool. And what does it look like anyways, right? Do you think when people say, I lost my temper, I lost my cool, it's different for everyone, isn't it?
Absolutely. It is different for everyone. And part of this process for every parent is learning what it looks like for you. So the most common one I would say is screaming at your kids, right? Yelling or screaming at them. But, my husband, for example, he's not a screamer. And so he'll kind of just use a really sharp tone, but he doesn't scream. And my kids will be like, don't scream at me. And he's like, but I didn't yell at them. And I'm like, well, yeah, but babe, for you, that's sort of your equivalent of yelling. And so for him, just this sharp tone can feel like a yell. And then, in other families, it gets even more chaotic and there's door slamming. People might throw things. In some cases, people are actually physically hitting their children. And if that's the case in your family, I would really encourage you to really reach out to someone for some additional support. And I have a lot of ideas in the book for how to do that, because if there is some physical abuse happening in your family, that does need to end. And it's a very painful, hard thing, but it can end. So anyways, losing it looks really different for every parent. And so identifying what that looks like for you when you feel out of control, when your response to your child is disproportionate to the situation. So for example, if you grab your kid really hard, but the reason you're doing it is because they were about to run into the street in front of a car, that's not a disproportionate reaction. And yes, it may have scared them. It may have even physically hurt them a little bit. But if that's what it took to save them from being hit by a car, that's really appropriate. So, but if you grab them really hard because, I don't know, you're trying to get them to put their shoes on or something, maybe that's a little disproportionate. So you really want to start noticing, when are you overwhelmed by big feelings? When does your behavior feel very out of control and reactive? And the word I often use is toxic. And toxic is a way to describe those moments when the situation feels like it could be damaging, really, to your relationship with your children because it is so out of control and frightening. And so I do encourage parents to just notice, what does that look like for you? And whatever it looks like, that's what it is, and that's the place where you want to start. And the reason you asked, why does this happen? The approach I take in the book to understanding this is a really neurobiological approach. And it's basically when our bodies and our systems go into what I call fight, flight, freeze, or freak out mode. Now, most of us have heard of fight or flight mode when, our stress hormones kind of explode and our body prepares itself physically to either run away from a physical threat or fight that physical threat. So even though our children generally don't present a physical threat to us, our bodies, because this is the way evolution designed us, still have this very physical response where, our pupils will dilate and our heart rate goes up and maybe we're breathing faster and our muscles get tense and our blood pressure increases. And all of this is happening to get us prepared to fight or run away. And I would also add freeze. This is something that some parents do. They kind of disconnect or disassociate from the moment. But for many of us, and what I address in the book is what I call the freak out, that this is this response because we have all this tension and energy and our body feels ready to, well, I need to fight this thing because on some level we perceive our child as a threat, even if we're not consciously doing that, or I need to run away. And if we can't physically do those things, what many of us will do is freak out. And so the way we release that tension is by losing it with our children. And so that's how I understand this process. And the reason I shared it in that way is because, well, A, I think it's true, but B, I really wanted to try to decrease the shame for parents because many parents feel like it should just be a matter of willpower. If I was a better parent, I could just decide not to lose my temper with my children. And I would argue that generally, that's not true, that once we are sent into this fight, flight, freeze, freak out mode, we can't just willpower our way out of it. And so I really wanted parents to understand this is a very natural human reaction to the challenges of parenting.
Yes. What's the opposite of losing it?
This is such a great question because I think many parents think the opposite of losing your temper is staying calm and patient and happy with a smile on your face all the time, no matter what your kid is doing. And I don't think that's true. I think it is absolutely acceptable to have strong feelings about what our children are doing and to express our strong feelings, but we want to do it in a way that doesn't scare our children, doesn't increase our physical stress or our children's physical stress or tension, that doesn't ideally damage our relationship with our children, and that models that, well, A, teaches them that their behavior has an impact on someone else, and also models that it is okay in healthy relationships for people to have strong feelings, and sometimes they're even strong, unpleasant feelings. That's a really typical, normal, healthy part of a relationship, but we share them in a way that isn't toxic, that isn't scary or overwhelming or out of control. So what this will look like in my family is when I'm really frustrated with my kids, I might say to them, you guys, I need to take a break because I'm feeling so frustrated with this situation that I'm noticing I might yell at you. And so I actually need to go in the other room. And we actually have sort of a kitchen and living room that are open to each other. So if they're in the living room, I can go into the kitchen. They can still see me. And that's especially important when children are younger to know you haven't just walked away. Although if you're really about to lose it and afraid you might hit your kid, walking away into the other room is definitely a better choice. But I'll go into the kitchen. I put my palms flat on the counter. Take some deep breaths. Maybe I'll try to lower my shoulders. Sometimes, because I often, like when I'm stressed, my shoulders go way up by my ears. Mm-hmm. Sometimes if I really have a ton of tension in my body, I will like sing a really loud song, make ridiculous noises. Like there are times when I have opened my mouth to yell at my kids and I'll just be like, blah, 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 instead. And that is hilarious. And it disrupts the tension of the moment, calms us all down. And then when we're calm, we can go back and talk about what the problem was. I'm not saying just because mommy lost it or almost lost it, you guys are off the hook and we're never going to talk about it. But getting us to a calm place allows us to talk about it. So, like I said, not losing it doesn't mean staying calm and smiley all the time. It does mean finding ways to calm yourself down enough that you can get to a point where you can discuss your emotions with your children in a way that they can hear it.
Yes. I do a similar thing too. speak Armenian in that moment when I'm angry. And of course, my child doesn't understand. And to her, it's when I'm like expressing something in an angry way, of course, your mother tongue is the best way to express anger. And she has learned those words.
Yes.
And sometimes she says, Mommy, what does this particular word mean? I'm like, I'm never going to tell you. Because then it helps me to release this anger in a foreign language, just like you do through singing or that verbal babbling.
Right.
It does help. Whatever works, you have to find that. So what makes parenting so hard, Carla? I know you have enlisted so fantastically. You have this enormous list in your book, and I concur with that. So let me ask you one question before we get to the hardest part of parenting. Do you remember a time that you lost your cool, like in a very unusual Carla way? Let's say it was very uncharacteristic of you. You always lose it in this typical way. But was there an incident or a story that like you lost it completely in a very different way?
That's a great question that I haven't heard before.
Yeah, you're on this podcast. We always ask weird questions.
I don't think so. I reserve the right to come back if something comes to mind. But off the top of my head, I have a pretty typical way of losing it. And it's like a downhill slide. So first, now because I've been paying attention to this for a few years now, I kind of know what my descent looks like.
Mm-hmm.
So my body gets real tense and I start to get quiet. And then I'll start answering my girls in very clipped 1 or 2 word answers. Yep. Okay, fine. Yeah, got it. Okay, got it. And when I get to the point where I'm doing that with them, answering them in these very short, kind of snappy voices, I'm probably 1 or 2 minutes away from losing it with them. And so that's the point that if I can catch myself, which I'm over the years, I've gotten much, much better at it. I can say, I need a break. I need some quiet time. For me, it's really getting a little physical space for my kids that's really important. Even if I'm just in, across the room and they're not talking to me, as long as they're not touching me, that's important for me to calm down. Other people really need to, move their body, jump up and down, get that tense energy out. But for me, it's that kind of snappiness, and then I start yelling. And that's what when I lose my temper, that's what it looks like.
Yeah, as you're speaking, I am trying to picture my own style, so to speak. Mine would be also like I become verbose. Instead of like those short, clicky words, I would become more wordy and more maybe critical, lecturing kind of way. And so I recognize, and of course there is stuff happening in my body as well, right? The heat rises, sort of the temperature. I feel like I'm choking or something like that. Like my head is about to blow up or something like that if I'm really tense and angry. But I think this is a good point to highlight for the listener to take into consideration their own style of losing it. As you mentioned, I mean, you have studied yourself for years.
Yeah. And in the book, I refer to these as tells. So these little signals or red flags that our body and our voices, our words, whatever it may be, these are our tells that sort of are signaling us, hey there, you're kind of heading the wrong direction here. You're about to lose it. And for many of us, we kind of breeze right through this. And depending on the intensity of the situation, it can build up over time, or we can go from 0 to screaming in 4 seconds or however long. And I really encourage readers and parents to try to notice these tells and see them as, like there's my red flag, time to slow down, and realize that that's actually, if you can catch those moments. So for me, it's the like short, snippy answers. For you, it's the sort of talking more and more and see, this is a signal that my body is giving me that like I'm headed towards the edge here.
Yeah.
So when we can recognize those tells, those are a powerful place to intervene with ourselves and kind of try to calm down before we lose it.
Yes, yes. It takes a while to develop that self-awareness, right? Because how do you get to that place? I mean, first you lose it and then you analyze your behavior, and then hopefully next time you're more aware and more aware and more aware, right?
That's exactly right. And I would say there's two important strategies for in developing this kind of self-awareness and insight.
Mm-hmm.
One is thinking about it as a practice. And look, many of us throw around the word practice and we don't really think about what it means. And so we're like, oh, I practice yoga, which means we put on yoga pants and maybe half the time go to yoga class and just do what the instructor says. And I really want people to think about it the way we talk about, let's say, practicing soccer, which is a word we use with our kids all the time. And what we mean with our kids is we send them out to soccer practice or piano practice or whatever it is with the expectation that at the beginning, they don't know what they're doing. And that's okay. They're there to learn. And every week they show up at the instrument or the practice field or whatever to get better at the skill. And if they make a mistake or if they're terrible at it at the beginning, we don't say to them, oh, you're awful at this. Why don't you just quit now? You're never going to get it. We say, this is part of the process. You show up every week, and after time, weeks, months, years, you will get better at this. And so when I say that it's a practice, that everything in this book is a practice, what I mean is you should assume that when you start, you're not going to be very good at it. And that's okay. That's where you are. But as you keep going with it, every time you show up to notice, to pay attention, to do sort of implement the various strategies I introduce in the book, you will get better because you are practicing. Now, the other really important strategy for all of this that I talk about a fair amount in the book is self-compassion. Holding a lot of kindness and forgiveness and it's okayness with yourself as you go through this process, because it's not easy. Some of it's really painful, and it's okay if you're not very good at it. And if you have slip-ups, I mean, I wrote this book and I still lose it with my kids sometimes. And there's a bunch of reasons to practice self-compassion. And I talk about exactly how to do it in the book. But one reason is it just makes the whole process feel a lot easier, because most parents walk around, and I hear this from the parents I work with, they feel such shame. And I felt that too. I used to feel that all the time about losing it with their kids. They feel like they're the only parents who do it. They feel like they're permanently damaging their children. They feel like they're bad parents because they've lost their tempers. And that is a really painful, awful way to move through the world. So when you can have compassion for yourself, it just feels easier. The next reason to do it is because research has found that when we have a compassionate approach towards our own challenges, we're actually more effective at changing habits. And the example that I use in my talks that everyone always knows what I'm talking about is, let's say you've just started a new diet. Maybe you're on day 2, day 3, and you find some Oreos in the cabinet and you eat a couple of Oreos. Anna, what is the first thing you probably think to yourself when you eat those Oreos?
Oh, I messed up. I'm a bad person. I can never follow through. All this negative dialogue.
I'm a terrible dieter. I'm never going to lose this weight. And so what do you think you're going to do after you have all those thoughts? The Oreos are right in front of you.
Yeah, I'm going to gobble it up because I already messed up. I might as well just take it all the way.
That's exactly right. We've all been there. I've been there too.
FYI, I don't like Oreos.
Not the best example for you, but
I never eat Oreos. Yes.
Well then, so we can pick a different example. But what research has found is that when a person can say to themselves, you know what, I just ate that cookie or ice cream or whatever your, food of choice would be. When you can say to yourself, I made a mistake. It's okay. This is hard. And making mistakes is part of being human. Everyone else makes mistakes too. We're all in this together. I can do better. And it's just a slip up. It's okay. You are significantly more likely to put the cookies or whatever back in the cabinet, throw them in the garbage, not take another bite. And so self-compassion is a very powerful way to change habits, which is what we're trying to do when we're working on not losing our temper, because it can actually become a habitual behavior. And so when we can have a lot of compassion for ourselves, we're not saying it's okay that you lost your temper. It's no problem. Don't worry about it. Just keep doing it. What we're saying is it's okay that you're not perfect. It's okay that you're working on this. And the third big reason to practice self-compassion is that if you are in a terrible headspace and you've just lost it with your kid, and then you're feeling guilty and ashamed and frustrated and annoyed at your kid, you're still in a really bad headspace. And if they come to you, you're actually likely to just lose it again because you still have all that tension built up. And when you can take a moment and say, well, that happened and it's okay. This is hard. I'll get through it. You're actually calming your body and your nervous system down, and you're much less likely to lose it again in the short term with your child. So it's both an important strategy for short-term kind of success and long-term behavior change.
Yes, yes, very well said. And plus, we're parents for the rest of our lives. There is so many next opportunities in parenting to be a better person, a better mom, a better dad, right? Don't focus on that mess up, on what just happened. Focus on, okay, I'm going to play Uno with my kid today. I'm going to take my child to the pool. I'm going to snuggle longer today or tonight. I think that helps me personally too, by focusing on doing something nourishing and positive with my child, as opposed to focusing, oh my gosh, I can't believe I said that to her. I can't believe that came out of my mouth. I called her a spoiled brat, or whatever it is that we do. That's one of my strategies. What do you say?
Yeah, so, I actually, when I have noticed that I've lost it, one of my first important strategies, the first crucial step before anything else, is I have to get myself calm and really calm, not just a little bit calm. Like, I have got to calm myself down. And I've actually gotten much better at that over the years. The next strategy is if I think I need to apologize, I do. I go to my children and I say, I'm sorry I yelled at you. I was feeling frustrated. I always try to take responsibility for how I felt. And I shouldn't have yelled at you. And so I do that. And then if, once I've reconnected with my child, then we can have a conversation about what happened. And sometimes, in all honesty, it really wasn't their fault. Look, I mean, actually, let me rephrase that.
Never. I don't think, I was going to say.
Yeah. But sometimes their behavior was problematic. Now, it's always my responsibility if I lose it, but there may be times when really they weren't doing anything wrong and I just didn't have any bandwidth to deal with anything. And then there are other times when they were actually doing something problematic that we need to have a conversation about. Let's talk about what happened, and let's talk about why that didn't work, and let's talk about what the strategy is for next time. So I don't really put my kids in timeout too much. I don't really use like screen time as a punishment generally. What we do is we have conversations about like, what is our strategy for the next time this comes up? Now, having said that, once I've done that, I usually take a moment and think about the bigger picture for me. What were some of the triggers? And this is something I talk a lot about in the book. What are some of the triggers I may have been dealing with that it set me on edge? And sometimes those triggers have to do with my kids, but more often than not, there are other things going on in my life. I didn't get enough sleep. I'm dealing with some chronic pain. I had a frustrating conversation with a colleague. I am dealing with a challenging situation with a family member. I'm worried about money. I got a flat tire. I have, an ingrown toenail. The list can go on and on, whatever our triggers may be. And the way I talk about in the book is that the effect of those triggers, many of which, again, have nothing to do with our kids, put our nervous system on edge. And the metaphor I kind of use for that in the book is I talk about our buttons. That when we are triggered, our buttons get big and bright and super sensitive and right at kid level. And then our children show up. And what does a kid do when they see a button? They push it.
They push it, man.
They jam their little fingers into it. That's what it means to be a kid. And then we lose it. And yes, I in an ideal fantasy world, we would teach our children to never push buttons. But the reality is our family members push our buttons through our entire lives. That's part of the deal. And so our job is to learn the strategies that make those buttons smaller and dimmer and less pushable, so that when our kid shows up with whatever either very typical appropriate kid behavior they have or their crazy shenanigans and they start pushing, it takes them a lot longer to find that button.
Yes.
And so
Amen.
yeah. And so if I know, if I've had a rough day or a rough week and I snapped at my kids, then actually for me, spending more time with them at that point is unlikely to go well. And that's what I save screen time for. That's when I'll say, guys, why don't we put on a show? And then sometimes I'll sit and watch with them if it's a hilarious show that's going to calm me down, and there's a few we like together. But more often than not, I will go do like 10 minutes of yoga poses to calm myself down. I'll have something to eat if I haven't eaten in many hours. I'll check a few things off my list. If I feel like my primary source of stress in that moment is a major task that hasn't gotten done and I'm really worried about it, I'll take the time to do that. So I feel like there isn't a specific right or wrong thing to do to calm yourself down. I think it's a matter of knowing what your trigger is and then doing the best to address that. And sometimes I will just say to my kids, girls, I haven't slept well in 2 nights. I am so exhausted. And when I'm exhausted, I get cranky, and they know this about me now. So why don't you guys watch a show, and then it'll be time for bed, and I need you to go to bed because I'm going to go to bed too. And I kind of just have to say to everyone, the rest of this night is kind of a wash. We're just going to do the best we can to get through it, and hopefully we'll all sleep tonight.
Yeah, when I said, I agree with everything you're saying, and I try to practice that too. So a couple of things I want to say. I remember something when you talk about pushing buttons from our first interview together. You said when something pushes your buttons, you just want to go to a toll booth and just sit there by yourself. I so remember that visual. It just came to me when you were talking about pushing buttons. And boy, do our kids know how to push our buttons. I think my daughter wants to do it on purpose sometimes. She just loves it. And I like the term less pushable. Make our buttons less pushable. I'm going to remember that as well. And when I said that I focus on, I'll do better next time, I'm not saying in the moment when I lost my cool. I was speaking about when I get stuck in those negative dialogues, inner critic talks to me, because our minds tend to hyper-focus on the negative, right? Let's say I lost it last week. I shouldn't be thinking about it all week. So what I do consciously, I try to focus on something I could do tomorrow, the next day, or in the next hour, something positive. That's what I was talking about. Nothing has to do when you're in the moment, in that reactivity, or you just lost your cool. So I just want to clarify that.
Sure.
Mm-hmm.
And I think
because I don't want to feel guilty forever for doing something. It happens. We all make mistakes. I'm not going to hyper focus and feel bad. And by feeling bad, I'm going to make more mistakes. My brain is going to be attacking my body. My nervous system is going to attack itself, right?
Absolutely. And I think that just deciding to not feel guilty is hard. I can't just decide to feel a certain way or not. Like, I don't know how to do that. If somebody has a strategy for automatically changing how you feel, that would be amazing. Please share that. So what I do is I notice the things that are sort of connected to my feelings that I can do that will help me get through a difficult feeling. So, when you're having a rough feeling, you got to kind of just acknowledge that it's there. Hi, there you are. Great. I feel angry. I feel frustrated. I feel powerless. I feel confused. I feel sad, whatever it may be. And then for me, it's about dealing with my thoughts and my behavior, which I think are the two things that can start to change my feelings. Now, I can't always control my thoughts, right? Because crazy thoughts pop into your mind all the time. But I can notice those thoughts and intentionally think something else. And so I have a lot of strategies and concrete suggestions in the book for what to think instead of these terrible, frustrating, guilty, shameful thoughts. And for some people, repeating a prayer or a mantra is really useful. For some people, singing a favorite song. For some people, counting. With my daughters, I taught them a strategy at night when their thoughts are kind of getting the best of them and they can't fall asleep. We start at 100 and subtract 3. And so I'll get them going and I say, what's 100 minus 3? 97. What's 97 minus 3? 94. And that is sort of just enough math in their head to keep their brain interested, but it's doable. And I say, look, if you get distracted from your subtraction and you start thinking this thought again, as soon as you realize that happened, just go back to 100 and start subtracting 3. And so there are a lot of strategies for sort of changing your thinking a little bit. It happens a few moments at a time, but you can stick with it. And then my behavior. So I find that if I'm in a really cranky mood, for me, either getting sleep is crucial, or getting outside and or moving my body. So I go for walks around my neighborhood basically every single day, weather permitting. And when the weather is not permitting, I do yoga on a mat at the end of my bed. But I have learned over the past few years researching this book and kind of living this experience that for me, moving my body in some way is an absolute requirement or I lose it. And my daughters will now say to me, Mommy, you seem pretty cranky. Have you gotten exercise today? And of course, when they say that, I want to bite their heads off because nobody wants to be reminded that they're cranky. But I try to take a few breaths and say, you know what? You're right. Thank you for pointing that out. So Anna, when you and I if you could see me, I'm dressed in my exercise clothes. I have my baseball cap on. And as soon as you and I are done recording this, I am headed outside for a walk.
I did that before recording this interview.
Yay,
yes,
good job.
I'm in the same outfit, but I went for a walk, and it's an absolute must for me to be in nature, to walk. Otherwise, I feel trapped. I will, like you said, bite the head of everyone that comes my way. I'm going to ask you about your strategy. You just go about the strategy. Yeah, honestly. Yes.
Yeah, what I was going to say is for one of my favorite strategies for moving my body when I don't feel like it is I always have an audiobook queued up, a juicy one. This is not when I make myself listen to my self-help inspirational books. This is when I give myself like a juicy mystery that I'm totally into. And I only listen to it when I walk, or if I'm going to the gym to get on the elliptical or something, I'll bring my iPad and watch my show. So right now I'm rewatching the entire season of The Office. It's hilarious. And I do it when I'm on the elliptical because then I'm really motivated because I want to go watch the show. Mm-hmm. And so for some people, that's a great strategy. Also having walking buddies or exercise buddies can help. And I do go through some of these strategies in the book, like how to build these habits that are really healthy and helpful, but they're still hard to build.
Yes. So what other things would you suggest? I know the book is packed with lots of good tools and suggestions, and we've talked about a bunch of really great stuff on this episode. Give us a couple of more and we will wrap up our interview today.
Yeah. So, a lot of these, this isn't rocket science, and I didn't come up with anything crazy new for folks. I just want people to start thinking of this not only as self-care, but as really crucial strategies that will help you stay calm with your kids. So some great examples, obviously sleep. I don't know anybody who can focus and function and stay patient and calm when they are exhausted and sleep deprived. Getting support, having other people around you. And I think that, we say it takes a village, and I think a lot of people think about it as you need to have people around you so you can get all the logistics of parenting and childcare and life taken care of. That's true. And it's also true that when we have other adults around us, we tend to lose it more, partially because A, we have help. B, for many parents, if parenting feels unsafe to you for any reason, if it scares you or makes you anxious, just knowing that there's another adult around, even if they're not explicitly helping with the child, can make people feel safer. And so that can calm down many people's nervous systems. Self-compassion is a big one, honestly. And we talked about stretching, moving your body, getting some exercise. You don't have to train for a marathon. Just do what works for you and your schedule and your style. And then breathing. The one that I come back to all the time is breathing, and I'll tell you specifically why. Mm-hmm. When our does all these things with the stress hormones. We talked about this. The pupils dilate, the blood pressure goes up, the muscles tense. All of these things happen that get us into this fight, flight, freeze, or freak out mode. And we cannot directly change any of them except our breath. So in that moment, our breathing often speeds up because we're getting ready for this intense physical reaction. And when we can intentionally slow down our breathing, it's kind of like sending a message directly to our nervous system saying, hey, there's no physical threat here. It's actually okay. Everything's going to be all right. You are safe. You don't need to freak out. You don't need to react. So when we can slow down the breathing, that slows down the rest of the nervous system and cools those buttons down a little bit. And so this will become a thing that becomes so automatic for you the more you practice it that it almost feels like weird to talk about it, because it's like, oh yeah, that's just a thing I do. I will go through entire days taking long, deep breaths because that's what it takes to get me through the day. And for years I didn't. For years I was not paying attention to my breathing at all, and I was losing it a whole lot more back then.
What parting words, advice, or a tip would you share with the listener?
I'm actually going to bring the listener back to self-compassion, because for me, this is so fundamental. And I think many parents don't even want to dive into books like mine. And there are many books out there about how to stop losing your temper. So find the one that's right for you. But many parents don't even want to open those books because they don't want to deal with it because it feels so awful. And so what I want to say to parents is, you're not alone. I promise you, you're not alone. We all struggle with this. And if you can have a lot of compassion and forgiveness for yourself, it's going to feel a whole lot easier to jump in and kind of start changing some of your habits.
Excellent. Carla, it's been a joy reconnecting with you. I can listen to you for hours, your wisdom and your wit, your humor, and you're very eloquent. You talk about this stuff very eloquently.
Oh, thank you.
And I apologize for my voice. It's been 3 weeks. My voice, I don't know what I had, but it's coming back. So I dare to conduct this interview with this voice. I want to say thank you, congratulations, and enjoy your summer.
Thanks so much. I really appreciate it.
And that's it for this episode of the Authentic Parenting Podcast. I hope you enjoyed this interview as much as I did. Carla is a very funny, witty, compassionate, and smart individual. I always enjoy talking to her. She mentioned compassion quite a bit. And if you haven't listened to my episode with Christine Neff, which is episode 119, it's titled How You Can Be Kind and Loving Toward Yourself, I highly encourage you do so. Even if you have listened before, it's a great episode to re-listen. I would also encourage you to check out the entire emotion series, starting from episode 148 and going up to 157 or 58. They're great episodes. Another episode I would recommend is episode 165, Breaking Free from Old Stories. As always, I would love to hear your feedback. Let's continue the conversation in our private Facebook group. You can follow Authentic Parenting on Instagram, and I am quite active on there. You can see my personal stories, and you can join the Authentic Parenting Facebook community. It's free. For show notes, contact info, and everything else, as always, visit authenticparenting.com. If you haven't already, be sure to subscribe to the show, rate, and leave a brief review on Apple Podcasts. Connect to the present moment, to yourself and your children. Until next week, I am Anna Seewald. Thank you so much for listening.